Today, I would like to talk about comics. Specifically, how the word comics and its definition are in need of some changes. I first realized this need when talking to a classmate of mine. Whenever someone came up to her and brought up the topic of comics, she became confused whether they were talking about comedians or comic books. And she's not the only one. This is actually a common mix-up that we have in our English language. But why is that? According to the Webster's Dictionary, a comic is stated as such: of or relating to a comedy, causing laughter or amusement, of or relating to comic strips. There, right there in the definition, the third definition, there's the issue that's being brought up. If this was never brought into the dictionary with the association to comic strips in the newspapers, we wouldn't have this issue. Now, with the comedy use of the word outweighing the graphic medium, we need to create a new word. But we also need to create a new definition for this new word. For this, I'll begin with the definition presented by Scott McCloud in his book, Understanding Comics. McCloud defines comics or graphic novels as a series of juxtaposed pictorial and other images in a deliberate sequence intended to convey information and or produce an aesthetic response in the viewer. Now, I know that's a little complicated with some of the high-level art terms that some people may not know, so I'll break it down a little bit. Juxtaposed or side-by-side pictures and imagery set in a sequence to tell a story or to create a response to something. Of course, according to McCloud's definition, things like Aztec and Egyptian murals would be considered comics because they tell a story in a sequence of images. And actually, in his book, McCloud even states that these are comics, in a sense. But I feel like these are a little too general, and we need a better definition for it. So, this is what I propose. There. It's a small change, but it's needed. Comics need to be easily accessible to people, and that's either through digital web comics or physically printed out comics. Now that we have a better definition of what a comic is, we can toss out the word comics, because we need a better phrase for this. As of right now, in English, we have generally two terms when referring to comics, and that's comics or graphic novels. And generally, graphic novels refer to thick comic books that are actually novel-sized, like This One Summer or Seconds. But what about short ones, or the ones in the newspaper? Before I give the term that I suggest that we use, I want to look at other languages' usage for what they consider comics. In Japan, they typically use the word manga, which the characters roughly translate as whimsical drawings. In France, they use bandes dessinées, which means drawn strips. And in Germany, they use Strippverhalen, which means strip stories. With these definitions, they give a general sense of what these things are. They're stories created with either within strips, or they're stories created through drawings. Now, the word I'm about to suggest is particularly more used for a critical sense, but can also be used for the everyday person. But it's going to take a while for us to get out of the actual comic usage. But I propose that we use graphic narratives, which is exactly what it is, in a graphical manner. Along with the definition I've given earlier, this is probably the best example of what we can call comics in the English language. Graphic narratives as a general term won't be as limiting and as confusing as comics is, and can even work as from anywhere from comic strips all the way to the graphic novels. So it's general, it works for everything, it's a better umbrella term than what we have comics is today. But it isn't perfect, and hopefully one day we can get to the point where we find the perfect word in our English language. But until then, I give you all graphic narratives as the replacement to comics.